All right, hello friends. Today I'm going to talk about a thought that came into my mind while reading Mind War by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. Let me quickly knock out of the way the author. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino is a Lieutenant Colonel of Psychological Operations Division in the United States Army. He is also a very controversial figure among certain people, and I think anybody that looks into his life will find him controversial for some of his philosophical leanings and for some accusations that have made in the past. Let me say, I know very little about the meat of those accusations, and nothing in this is intended to be really about Aquino, but I have to recognize that because of the man's status, I need to at least address it. And so just let me say, if you're somebody out there who can't handle the idea of somebody talking about somebody else's ideas without thinking that it is a support of anything that the man might or might not have done in the past, then this probably isn't the video for you, and this really probably isn't the channel for you. I'm interested in wrestling with difficult ideas and understanding the world, and doing so in a fun way and sharing things with people out there. That's what I'm all about, man. And I have to say, I don't really have an opinion on Aquino's the allegations against Aquino, because I don't really know much about them. But I'm aware of his status in the lore of certain alternative history researchers, and I'm not trying to marginalize that or disrespect it. I have no opinion one way or the other. I haven't looked into it enough to know. What I became curious about, I've always been curious about the human mind, but I'm really curious about things like psychological warfare, social engineering, all of these concepts. I've just always found them really fascinating. And for those people out there who may think, oh, is this some kind of woo-woo? Dude, there's nothing woo-woo. Go read Norbert Wiener and Cybernetics. Read books by Aquino. Read books by this book. The foreword to this book is written by Major Gregory Cease, or Cece. I'm not sure if it's Cease or Cece, but he is also, he's a major in the United States. And when I checked, it appears that he's still a sitting major in the United States Army. So, dude, none of this stuff is weird. It's weird, but none of this stuff is, like, I'm not making any of this up. These are real things that have been thought by real thinkers. And just do a little bit of military history. The history of psychological operations in the military is well known. Okay. That was a long introduction to what I'm about to get into, but I hope anybody out there understands that it's necessary when discussing a delicate topic and a book that was written by such an incredibly controversial person. Okay, so that out of the way. I am going to break this book down, man, because this is a fascinating book. It's a very complex book, and so I need to be careful, and I need to take time to really understand it before I present anything else about it. But there was one thought that emerged that I wanted to deal with, because I think it's a useful action item that can come out of the book. Before I get into it, I would like to briefly say that the much of this book is actually discussing ethical implications of what it calls physical war. It differentiates between physical war and mind war. And I found that interesting, because a lot of the book is actually kind of like a criticism of traditional military approaches. And I just find that interesting, because Aquino was a lieutenant colonel. This book is endorsed by a major. And I find that I find that reassuring in a way, that those kind of debates are allowed to happen at the higher levels of the military, and that these things can be discussed without the person just being silenced, because a lot of it is a criticism of the damage of physical war, but not only that, it's also a criticism of how in the operation of physical war, psychological operations are used on people to force them into physical war, basically. But again, I'm being careful of going into areas that I haven't sat down. I've made 2 mistakes in these videos, at least 2 with sloppy language that have gotten me corrections, and I don't like that. I don't want to be another person who is sloppily throwing things out. I want to be careful and precise. But anyway, so that's just an interesting thing about this book. And what's also interesting, and the part where I really don't want to go beyond what I'm capable of going with right now, is that it's not just psychological war. He actually makes an effort to differentiate it from traditional psyops, psychological operations. It's like something else. It's something broader. It's really interesting. But anyway, so one of the things that was in the book, and it was actually a relatively small portion of the book, but it happens to dovetail into a lot of my own thinking that's been happening for the last couple years, and that is this. It's kind of a criticism of democracy, and not of the system of democracy, but Aquino's, the point that is put forward in the book is that the foundational idea of democracy is that you are dealing with a system of free-thinking, rational individuals who then decide as a group who is going to rule them. But the fact is, and this is a fact, the way that this actually plays out is that you have various factions who use tools, psychological tools, for how to create mass consent. And this stuff goes back. You can find this stuff like Edward Bernays. I read his book Crystallizing Public Opinion, which is written back, I think it was like back in the 40s or something. Either way, it was way back in the day. People have been talking about this for a long time. Really smart people. So, I mean, there's a whole science behind the marketing industry, and political systems use these same things. I mean, the military has it at another level. So, the challenge that arises out of that is that the fact is that democracies are not composed of individual, free-thinking, rational people. They are largely composed of people who don't know themselves and are therefore very vulnerable to psychological manipulation. And they are composed of individuals who are under some actual psychological manipulation. None of this, we don't have to go into like conspiracy theory here. This is just a fact. I mean, why do you think people have commercials? Why do you think you have political slogans? All of these things, they're all ways to manipulate. Not manipulate though, like I'm trying to avoid making it nefarious, but they're ways to persuade and influence people, right? And that's a fact. And so, but the tricky thing is, we as individuals, we hallucinate that we see these things. We're like, yeah, I saw this information and I rationally processed this information. But anybody who has actually examined themselves will know that that's not always true. We are all capable of tricking ourselves and falling for manipulation and persuasion. That includes me, and I am somebody who has spent an inordinate amount of time thinking and studying such topics, and even I find myself like falling for this stuff all the time. So sorry, man, if you think you're immune, I think you're probably hallucinating that. You might be less vulnerable than other people. You might be a little more aware than other people. But dude, we all fall into it sometimes. And so that creates a philosophical dilemma, right? Because the foundation of the idea of democracy itself is therefore questionable, right? Because if it's based upon the foundational idea of independent thinking creatures, or independent thinking human beings who are rational and capable of discerning fact from narrative, and then we prove that, and then we show that that is not the actual case, then the very foundation of the idea of democracy it's on shaky ground. And so, and let me clarify, in my continued effort to be careful here, understanding the volatility of the subject and the author of this book, that he does not then go on to say that we shouldn't have democracy. That's not his point. He's just saying that's a problem with democracy and it's something that we need to look at. And so, okay. And so this is the thought I had. So I began realizing in our current crazy times, as things got out of control, my first thought was, what did I do wrong and how could I have made things better? And in that analysis, what I realized was that I was not nearly politically involved enough. I voted. So what? I mean, like, real meaningful political involvement goes beyond that. But what I've come to realize, and what this book reinforced, is that it goes even deeper, man. And this is something a lot of people aren't going to want to hear, and it's probably hopeless. Right? I acknowledge that it's probably hopeless, but what can you do, man? Hopeless situation. You still got to keep trying to fight for what's right. My point is, living in a time when certain bodies and certain people have mastered these technologies of persuasion and influence. And also, let me say, when I say that, that's not a criticism of those groups, because I look at it as that's just the world, man, right? So it's like, if you're in that world and you say you're in a world where you see one side of a thing is manipulating everybody to a way that you don't like, what choice do you have? What choice do you have but to engage these people in a similar fashion, because these people have not shown a prior willingness to do the hard work, to study through things, and to really learn core principles and get at what's right. So I look at it more as it's just life, man. It's just life. And there are bad guys in any conflict. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, what I want to clarify is, when I discuss things where I'm like, oh yeah, it looks like these people are influencing or persuading people, that's not necessarily like I'm not condemning them or anything. To me, that's the world we're living in, right? And everybody's got to play by the rules of the world that we're given, like it or not, man. And so, it's like in wartime, you got to make difficult decisions. And so one would presume that in an information war, if nations were locked in such an information war, every side would have no choice, really, but to implement their own information war measures, right? And so I'm not trying to paint any of this as nefarious or evil. I look at it more as a sad necessity of the world that we've been born into, you know? And but anyway, all of these asides, these are not actually me rambling. These are me trying to be very careful, because I understand like what I'm talking about can be taken in all different directions. But anyway, so what I realized was that in the modern day, like it or not, part of being an informed and effective contributor to democracy is really and truly understanding ourselves, understanding the vulnerabilities of our own mind, understanding propaganda, psychological operations, probably maybe understanding mind war. Like I said, I haven't finished the book, so I'm not sure. And I forget if I mentioned this, so let me say again, the book actually differentiates itself from psychological operations. And again, I'm trying to avoid this, but I'm trying to avoid saying things that could be taken. So I'm just going to lay off. Just let me say, I think it is an action item for everybody to consider that in this modern world that we live in, where it doesn't even have to be anybody intentionally like orchestrating anything against anybody, right? It could just be like the madness of social media, the madness of the media, all of these things. Like today, I feel like to be responsible participants in democracy and for democracy to work, which I certainly want it to work because I don't like any of the other options at all. Well, I either don't like them or don't think that they're practical and don't think that they'll ever actually come to happen. And so, we have to go to another layer. It has to actually go beyond political involvement, and it has to be taking time to truly understand our own minds, to truly understand how we can be influenced, to understand how suggestible we actually are. Like it or not, we are suggestible animals, man. Somebody can say something and boom, your mind goes in that direction. Next thing you know, you're in Vegas with no pants in 2 weeks of lost time and not knowing how you got there. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? Like, yeah, we are suggestible creatures, and it's something we have to be on top of. And yeah, I guess I don't want to go like too. I don't want to get to the point where I feel like I'm getting too over the top with it, but I don't think it's actually unreasonable to say that for democracy to truly work at its max, to truly fulfill the vision that democracy was born with, like self-improvement, self-betterment, and maybe even the thing called enlightenment might have to be the central concerns of everyone involved. I know that's a heavy claim, man, and I'm happy to have debates about it. Please leave comments below, but yeah, I feel like self-understanding at a really profound level is necessary in order to be confident that we are maintaining our rationality and our reason as we make our political decisions. And I know that's a heavy thought, man. And I know that's a huge burden to bear, and that's a ton of responsibility, but I'm looking at it and I kind of think that's right. I mean, I think the criticism, and by criticism I mean in a scholarly academic sense, which is different from how it's commonly used. Like, the book is, like I said, it's not saying like democracy sucks, we need to get rid of it. It's just saying, looking objectively at democracy, this is a problem with democracy. And it's right. It's correct, man. Like it or not, that is an accurate criticism. And so the question then becomes, so what do we do about it? And it seems to me that individually, the only things that I can act on, the only action items that I can take on, are to continue to study things like this, continue to study the mind, continue to study how people are manipulated, how I can be manipulated, and as well as continuing to practice meditation, continuing to study myself, and understand myself, to make myself as little suggestible and as little prone to influence as possible. Right? And then there's another, there would become another question to the responsibility, because then the question would move to, okay, and so we need a whole nation of people like that, or at least a good large core of people like that. And so then how do we do that? And then that becomes tricky, because is the way to do that to manipulate them into self-betterment? It opens strange questions, man. And it's one of the things, and this is my frustration. Right now, I'm just speaking of my frustration. There may be a perfectly good reason for this. All right? My frustration is, like, why is stuff like this not discussed more, like, publicly? Because, yeah, I don't know, man. I feel like so much could be eliminated from people's fears and suspicions if these groups and these thinkers were just more open, you know? But then again, this is open. This is a public, freely accessible book. This isn't something I had to work to find. I ordered it on Amazon, man. And so I guess I could see them saying, dude, we did put it out there, just nobody's paying attention because they're too busy watching stuff. Again, I don't want to get into criticism, and none of this is meant, as I say all the time, I come to nothing preaching from a high horse. I'm a dude in the trenches with everybody else looking around saying, how do we get ourselves out of this? And how do we learn? How do we have good, productive, happy lives? All of these things. So, never coming from a high horse, because I do not deserve a high horse. I'm a fallible person who has a tremendous amount to learn. So yeah, man, that's it. Those are my thoughts. I'd be interested to hear what other people have to think about it. So thank you, everybody. I hope you're having great 2022s. I hope you're having productive, happy, and successful years. And if not, I hope you can find ways to spin things around and get on a good, positive road. Thank you very much for your time, my friends. Peace out.